My name's Andrew Schipp and welcome to Industry and Investment's mid-season rice review. I'm going to give you a rundown on the rice season so far in southwest New South Wales and then take you around the districts to introduce you to some of the district agronomists and see some of the crops in other parts of the state. The big news at the start of the season was water, and finally enough of it to see a return to a more normal area of rice being planted. Rain set in, rivers rose, and most of our major water storages filled and some of them even overflowed. Some southern farmers were tempted to sow early to take advantage of off-allocation water, but most stuck to the proven recommended sowing windows. In comparison, in the northern rice districts, the ongoing rain stalled seedbed preparation and had many growers struggling to get urea into the ground before fill-up. We had our share of establishment issues, scattered reports of herbicide damage, slime because of the large amounts of organic matter, and masses of ducks that proved difficult to move on. But as happens in most years, the rice eventually climbed out of the water and farmers breathed a collective sigh of relief. With the earliest crops starting to reach the critical panicle initiation stage at Christmas, I began the tour around districts early in the new year. I caught up with John Smith at Norm Thomas's farm over near Warcool. Farmers in John's group had their own establishment issues, snails for example and slime. Bloodworm also persisted longer than usual. High levels of organic matter were blamed for this. Varieties in this area were most commonly Quest or the new YRM 69, with Rizik and Amaru and Jarrah making up the balance. Leading up to Christmas, a lot of crops started showing symptoms of yellowing off, more than the typical mid-season yellowing we see each year. While the farmers in this area didn't have as many difficulties applying their pre-sowing nitrogen, there was a general agreement that crops looked hungry coming up to the panicle initiation stage.
If they get a bit of root material like that.
I asked John about the nitrogen uptake figures he'd been receiving from the tests that were coming in from crops from around his district.
Yeah, so this year we've been finding very low nitrogen uptakes compared to what we'd normally find. We've been finding them much less than the rice check recommendations, with numbers around about sort of between 60 and 100 kgs of nitrogen in the planted PI, and that's almost been regardless of fertiliser application at sowing. And the best sort of thought behind that is that it's been related to the cold season that we've had so far.
Next stop was the Murrumbidgee irrigation area where I met Marianne Lattimore at Gary and Marg Nagy's farm near Gajeldery. Farmers in the MIA were almost finished a long and frustrating winter crop harvest. Rice crops in this area were looking good, especially those sown in early October. Access to more water late in the season saw some later sown crops going into hastily prepared fields. Coupled with a cloudy and slightly cooler early November, these crops took a while to get going. Rain events made water level management difficult, and low levels of solar radiation also impacted. In Marianne's district, Molinate, Taipan and Satin were commonly used, whereas in the Western Murray Valley, Viper was most common. Follow-up spraying with MCPA 250 or Bazagran M60 is required for all programs to manage herbicide resistance, and this is becoming increasingly hard as grapes and now cotton increase in area. At this meeting, farmers had the benefit of Brian Dunn's experience to correctly identify the panicle initiation stage, which signals the start of the ideal top dressing window.
Some good footage out of this.
I asked Marianne what important crop management decisions Gary and Marg will have to make for their crop over the next couple of weeks.
Well, this crop here behind me is probably at panicle initiation, PI. It was sown in early October and we're now in the first week in January, and in about 2 weeks' time it'll reach a stage called microspore, which is very sensitive to cold. So at this time of year we're looking at raising the water level so that if we do have any cold temperatures, the plants will be insulated against the cold.
Over in the Colliamberley irrigation area, crops were also reaching that important panicle initiation stage in the first couple of weeks of January. I caught up with District Agronomist Kieran O'Keefe. Coleambally farmers were also winding up winter cereal harvest as storms again began to appear. Between the 10th and 15th of January, all districts received heavy rain, with Hay recording 120 millimetres, 1/3 of their annual average. For rice farmers, the rain topped up bays at the same time as they were starting to notice and really begin to use water. The crop at the meeting's host farm had already reached PI and had been top dressed with urea at 125 kilograms per hectare. Rates of nitrogen for top dressing were on the minds of most farmers. We met at Gary McMillan's crop at Farm 48 over in Coleambally, and I got Kieran's impressions about the importance of the near-infrared test for managing nitrogen top dressing decisions.
So I think it's pretty important that we actually do the available test, which is the tissue test, which is a free test available to growers. The only thing they have to put into it is a bit of time, but it actually gives you a really good indication of your nitrogen status in your crop, so you can see what rate for top dressing, and if any people will actually waste urea, they might top dress and not get a response if their crop is already at the right nitrogen status.
Otherwise we're pretty well just guessing the nitrogen rate, aren't we?
Yeah, and growers probably are conservative and just put on a little bit of nitrogen, but in some cases crops probably don't even respond at all because they're already at good nitrogen uptake levels.
My final stop was down in the Murray Valley again, where I met John Lacey, well-known agronomist with the rice industry for the past 30 years. John's meeting in the Blighty district was scheduled for Tim Bradford's farm, but the same rain that had drenched Hay saw us move to the Blighty pub.
A lot of people said this year we were really pleased to see the old mid-season yearling prior to Christmas. You know, the old classic mid-season yearling. A lot of you have that in your crops.
Yeah, really after the cold.
Yeah, which is
after the
doesn't even have to be cold. So that's just a phase when the rice is growing very quickly and it just can't quite get as much nitrogen supply from the soil. So it just goes through a very temporary nitrogen deficiency. And we think that because of the cooler temperatures this year, that's probably a bit exacerbated. But some of the yellowest crops can end up being the greenest crops at PI. So,
of the many topics discussed at Blighty, farmers were keen to hear about temperatures and how that was shaping the crop so far.
This is early October through to February. These are the maximum temperatures, these are the minimum temperatures, and if you can see it, the average temperature is this black line going through there, and same for the minimum. There's the average, that sort of black line going through there, and then the green is this year, right? So we'll just follow the maximums. So you can really see that the maximums have pretty well followed the average. You know, all the way through to late November, a little bit above average in early December, a drop in mid-December. At the end of December, average, and at the moment just very slightly above average. If you look at the minimums, you can see that the minimums are almost exactly following the average till early November. They, believe it or not, from mid-November through to early December, they're actually a bit above average. They're above average. Again, that bit of a dip in mid-December and late December, but at the moment, a little bit, just a fact, well, around about average at the moment in early January. So, what surprised the farmers and all in the other groups is that if you look at the sort of general establishment period, the temperatures were around average.
A break in the weather let us get out of the pub and check out one of Tim's crops located near the road. This crop had reached PI a couple of days earlier. John put it to the group to guess the PI top dressing rate. The range of answers varied by as much as 60 kilograms per hectare amongst the group, and this reinforces the value of the nitrogen test providing an accurate estimate for top dressing. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this edition of our rice review. Thanks to the District Agronomist for helping out, and also thanks to the farmers for letting me visit their crops. And also special thanks to Brett Wade for letting us use his crop as the background for this edition.